Italian
your,
pizza.
your mother and everybody, your daughter, everybody had a pizza.
No anchovies.
Tina.
We'll worry about that.
But it was
next.
girls'
I
day.
gotta run.
mean,
What?
yeah.
Tina.
Oh,
Ready?
I thought there was a crisis in
No,
Public Works.
solar, LED. Gotta make sure I'm on it.
Figured I'd tell you beforehand.
Start then.
All right, here we go. Before we get into capital projects, couple housekeeping items, please. Speak into the microphones. I guess people at home cannot hear us. Let's go back real quick to replacement vehicle 120 for $23,349. This is A1's vehicle.
Correct, this is A1 vehicle. This was the city manager's vehicle, was the white Expedition. Since then, he's been forward another Expedition, so this is basically a hand-me-down of a hand-me-down, and the rating is over 75. I was just in conversation with our crews.
Anybody have an issue with it?
I smell Snickers.
What's that? So we'll keep it in? Okay. All right, let's start at capital projects.
Ted, before we
Yes.
go
Sorry.
on, I had one question. Going back to the Darien Historical Society, I found what Scott Korn had given us last year regarding the painting and woodworking restoration, and at that time it was estimated at $22,200. As best I can tell, it was for inside and outside, and now we're looking at $42,500, and I'm wondering where the difference is.
I'm
Is
not
that
sure.
for the Historical Society?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure where those figures came from. Obviously, I took the time to meet with the representatives of the Historical Society, list all the needs. I had a detailed list of all the expenses. So again, if that's something that Scott had, I really can't speak to that.
Yeah, he had an estimate from Joe Gleason, Great Lakes Painting and
Correct.
Decorating. And was that supposed to be for inside and outside?
Probably wasn't the abatement included in there at the
It
time.
does say costs included required lead abatement.
Again, yeah.
So I know.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't the outside, though.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Right, and the answer is no, because I had separate costs all detailed on spreadsheets of exterior, interior, and the contingency of the woodworking. I had put that in there. For
Right, because
FY
originally it was
17.
a $7,000 estimate, and then I think when you added the abatement costs in, it came up to $22,000.
That's correct.
So do we think this 40? So you're not sure about the 22, or you're not sure about the 42?
I'm sure the numbers that are all in the budget this evening,
That's what.
that's what the numbers are.
That's what it's going to cost now.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let's start with capital projects fund budget, page 65. Just to recap for FYE 15 budgeted numbers. We transferred, or we're going to transfer from our general fund, $2,502,174. We actually came in at $2,947,611, which was an increase of $445,000 due to our audited numbers, and we immediately transferred that to capitals. Our property taxes, we budgeted $202,756, and that's what we're coming in at. Grants and reimbursements, we budgeted $11,500, and our revenue basically came in at $82,900, which is an increase of $71,000. The sale of the Darien Point property produced $1,200,000. We did have some soil remediation, but that's down below. And then under interest income, we were at $10,000 that we were budgeted. We actually came in at $55,000, which was an increase of $45,000. So in the revenue section of our capital projects, we budgeted to have revenue of $2,726,430. We came in at $4,488,267, mostly because of the sale of the property, and $445,000 from the transfer for the audited numbers. That was an increase of $1,761,837 versus our budgeted revenue. When we go down to costs under capital, we'll start with ditch and drainage projects. We budgeted $1,712,200, and we came in at $1,754,000, an increase of $42,000. At sidewalk replacement, which is now a maintenance item, we budgeted $81,345. We came in at $83,600, which was an increase of about $2,000. Under the crack seal program, we budgeted $125,500, but we came in at $111,100, a savings of about $14,000. Under curb and gutter program, we budgeted $288,985, and we came in at $270,600, savings of about 18,000. I'm going to come back to equipment and other projects, and I want to go down to street reconstruction reconstruction. Our budget was $1,073,000, and we ended up coming in at $1,022,000, which was a savings of $51,000. When you basically take into account street reconstruction, curb and gutter, crack seal program, sidewalk replacement, ditch and drainage projects, we budgeted $3,281,030. We came in at $3,241,300, a savings about $39,730. As we go back to equipment and other projects, we budgeted $194,000. We did come in at $545,250, which was an increase of $351,000. $200,000 was for soil remediation for the strip mall, and $150,000 was for the clock tower. So go down to bond payment, $202,756. We came in $203,256, $500 higher. And consulting professional services, $42,000 was our budget, and that's our actual number. In expenditures in that area, we budgeted $3,719,786. We came in at $4,031,806, an increase of $312,000, mostly because of the soil remediation and the clock tower. As we start with the ending number for fiscal year ending 14, we had an available balance of $5,228,930. We were budgeting that we were going to take a loss of $993,356, but because of the sale of the property and the transfer, we came in at a positive number of $456,461, a difference of $1,449,000. It was the difference. So when we take that beginning fund balance of 5228, okay, actually, I'm sorry, let me go back to budget. We were anticipating a beginning fund balance of 5183 with a loss of 993. Our ending fund balance would have been 4,190. We have a reserve balance that we always put off to the side of 500,000. We are anticipating our available balance to be 3,690,550. But our actual numbers, again, because we actually had we showed 456,461 to the positive. When we take our actual beginning balance of 5,228,930 and add the 456,461, we came in at 5,685,391. We did not use our 500,000 reserve balance, so that's our final number. The difference of 3,690,000 was our budget, and we came in at 5,685,000. Which is almost an increase of $2 million. As we go and look at fiscal year ending 16 with our budget requests, we're looking to transfer from the general fund $1,786,989. We go out to 17 and 18, we're looking at transferring from the general fund $2,425,000, and then in 18, $1,667,000. But for fiscal year ending 16, we're basically looking at property taxes the same as pretty much as before, 203,006, grants and reimbursements of 180,000, and interest income of 25,000 for a total revenue of 2,194,995. We're looking to do expansion items this year in ditch and drainage of 1,496,000 and 560,000 in equipment and other projects for 2,070,000. Included with that, with our total maintenance requests of $2,247,351, we're looking at total expenditures for 16 at $4,318,000. That would leave us a fiscal year balance of negative $2,123,156. But again, we have an available balance of $5,685,000. With that, our ending fund balance would be $3,562,235. We will put $500,000 away for reserve, and we will have an available balance of $3,062,235. As we go out to 17, we take $3,062,235, and we're expecting a fiscal year number for 17 of a negative $769,975, which would bring us down to $2,292,260. The reality number is actually $500,000 more if we don't use our reserve balance of $2,792,260, if my math is correct. As we go through 18, even with our transfer of 1,667,446, we're looking at expenditures of 3,564,532 versus revenue of 1,879. We're looking at a total balance coming down to 606,738. There is no reserve balance we put in this one, but an extra 500,000. So I'm looking at my math is correct, sorry, 606 plus the 500. 1,106,738 is what we're anticipating our ending available balance for fiscal year 18 will be. Any questions on that?
Sure,
please?
one
Yes.
comment. I think you start out with the, looking at the budget for the drainage projects, and that is correct. It was approved at $1,712,000. The estimated actual is $1,754,000, but that original budget was enhanced by the council. I don't know if it was mid-year or during the projects. I think there was another 100 or some thousand added.
90,000.
But the budget wasn't revised, but in actuality, the council allocated additional money for those projects, which is why we came in over the budgeted amount.
Gotcha. Michael?
And only comment is fairly small, but under consulting professional services, showing a budget of 42,000, projecting estimated actual of 42,000 at the end of January. And Marie and Paul, maybe you can check the February number for me. We were already over. We were already at $66,000, so we were already over by $24,000.
There's gonna be a reclassification on that account. There was an item that was budgeted under other projects, and it was for consulting. We classified it as consulting. We're gonna reclass it back to the other projects, to be more in line with what we budgeted.
Okay, so still within the capital projects fund?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Any other questions from that? So let's go to page 66.
I do have a question, Ted.
Sure.
And this is for our treasurer. I mean, that's we're watching our, available balance plummet, really, and it's just forecasting just a few years out. So, I mean, do you have any comments or concerns?
Well, this is obviously, with police and fire protection and the capital projects that we do for the city, obviously, those are the most important aspects, I think, of the services we provide to the residents of the city. But obviously, anybody that knows basic arithmetic knows you can't continue putting $2 million in the fund and spending $3.5 to $4 million and having deficits of $1.5 million to $2 million a year. And that's reflected in, as you get 3 years out, having a balance of $600,000 plus, assuming we don't spend the reserve, another $500,000 of $1 million reserve. Again, as I indicated at the start of the meeting tonight, if the state does come along and if we lose half of our state income tax, again, I wouldn't anticipate that we would lose all of that, but something's going to be done to everybody, in this state, so I'm sure we'll feel some ramifications of that. I think it's important that we do provide these services to the residents, but I think you as a city council, as the alderman, really need to take a careful look at everything you're approving. Everything, especially in this budget, is a high dollar item, obviously. I know in the past we were able to take advantage. We did have not excess reserves, but we had better reserves than a lot of other municipalities, so we were able to take advantage of a lot of good pricing we were able to get and accelerate a lot of projects, to Dan's credit, in the earlier years. When we had the money, we were able to take advantage of it because the contractors didn't have the work. Now I think those tables are turning a little bit, so I think Dan's probably finding out that it's more expensive doing even the same as what we did before. So, no, as you get to that third year out, at that point, the chickens are going to come home to roost, and we're going to have to make a decision at that point, either discontinue some of these services, or residents, if they still feel it's important to them, are going to have to realize that a tax increase would be needed to cover those same services.
And I may have missed it, but what would be, worst-case scenario, the impact from the state?
Well, based on what Governor Rauner has proposed, it would be about $1 million per year in our budget right now. Again, the state budget starts in July 1st. Ours starts in May 1st, so we wouldn't feel the full impact this year, but assumably if it went through as proposed, it would probably cut even this year's by $800,000 and then reduce it by $100,000 each of the next 2 years. So if that were the case, take $2.8 million out of the $1.1 million, and we're at a deficit of $1.5 to $1.7 million at the end of our 3-year scenario. Assuming we didn't make any other adjustments in the budget at that point. That's what I was trying to get through, the important consideration at the beginning, that it's important we give some thought to everything that we're approving here. I know it's sometimes easy to poo-poo $300 here and $400 there, but if we have to take a haircut like that every few dollars will be important, and seeing that we can still provide the important services, again, police protection and these services to the residents.
What's the timing with respect to our final budget being approved as far as hearing from the state? Do we have any idea?
No, I mean, at this point, it has to go through the
Right, right.
legislature, all the negotiations that are going to go back and forth there. There's no way that Rauner's budget is going to be
Right,
approved the way it is. We know that, but again, we also know that we're the worst-ranked state financially, so we know something has to happen.
Something has to be done.
And again, if what you believe he says is true, which I believe is true, that everybody's going to have to feel the pain in some form or another, I do believe that.
All right, thanks.
All right, page 66, capital projects, 25-35-4376. Should we look at each individual one, or should we take the top three, like we did last year?
Alderman Shower, maybe I could add one other comment. When we prepared this budget and sent it out, we were under the assumption in one of our projects that the county would front the money and get the money back. But since then, Dan has received a draft of the intergovernmental agreement, and it's gonna be a wash, but the expenses will be increased by $140,000, and the revenue will also be increased by $140,000. This is the engineering for the Bailey Road,
Okay.
Bailey and Plainfield light. So the numbers will be revised, as we have all the revised numbers. But again, I think Dan might have mentioned that at his meeting last night. So both those numbers will be added, but again, that's a wash.
So let's look at these big three ditch projects. Chestnut in Alabama for $555,900, 69th Street for $433,600, and then Tennessee drops down to $196,500. Dan?
Okay. First of all, Chestnut and all these roads all these ditches, the roadways are proposed to be completed next year as per the road program catalog and the rating system. Chestnut in Alabama is actually two roads within the Clearfield subdivision. One cannot be done without the other. If Chestnut is done, Alabama, there'll still be a couple homes there that'll have some repercussions if Alabama is not done. If Chestnut is not done and Alabama is completed, the water, again, has nowhere to go, the stormwater. So with that said, we wanted to combine both projects because it makes sense. The pricing that's in here, we already went out to bid. We got unit pricing for the vendor, for the materials, from pipe to stone, et cetera, et cetera. This cost would be $555,900 for this project. Second project is 69th Street.
Dan, can we just take one at a time?
Sure.
If there's any questions. So for the first one, for those who are following along with the road, the ditch rating program, that would take care of, there's two line items, one called Clearfield Alabama Avenue and one called Clearfield Chestnut Lane. Is that correct?
Correct. Clearfield is just basically the subdivision.
Your maintenance request is for $560, and the budget is $555,900. Is this? Bring that up.
That was prior to the bids. So 555,
Is the accurate one?
correct. Whatever is in the budget now is the accurate number.
That goes across the board? Because there's a couple that are
Yes,
different.
yes. Those were my estimates prior to the bidding and all the materials that came in.
And I wanted to add that this is a resident that has shown up for many meetings. In 2014, I think at least 2 meetings that he showed up with his concern. He's the one that's on the corner of Chestnut and Alabama.
Right. Unfortunately, he gets the impact of the water that's driven through his side yard, into his backyard, and there's some reporting of some seepage at the structure as well during 15, 20-year rain events. In conjunction with, there's other problems on the entire block. This is just one of the more severe ones on that entire block.
What's people's thoughts on this?
I
I've met that resident. I'd say you got to do it. I've been in that guy's backyard, and it gets a lot of water when he gets a good amount of rain.
Well, I mean, according to the rating system, it's one of the higher rated, according to the ditch projects rating. Whether you do it or not, it shouldn't be a matter of whether it's you know, if you don't do it, you're not doing it because you want to save the money, not
Right.
because it isn't needed. The need is there.
Right.
We know that. Through his conversations with him, going out there and seeing it, we know that it's happening. So, I mean, you either accept the cost of it or you say, we're not going to do it and save the money. And I don't see that as a viable alternative.
Neither do I.
What else is everybody's feelings on it?
I'm good.
I mean, I would say that with all of them. I mean, none of these are down here because it's something we decided to do because it was going to be fun to do it. All of these are necessary. I mean, I realize they're all in Tina's area over there for the most part. I don't know if anything covers anybody else's ward, but they're
It is, it's Alderman Belzak's ward, too.
a little bit of Tom, isn't it?
Well, I guess I have a question. I mean, when these subdivisions were designed with these ditches, have things changed that that don't allow the water to drain properly? I mean,
The
what
answer is
caused?
yes.
Okay, so what caused this? Is it
Combination of things, lack of inspections, lack of being governed under a certain body. A lot of it was under the DuPage County jurisdiction. Stormwater ordinances weren't in place. Rather, one of the primary things that was happening is Bob would come in and build his house, and, okay, I need somewhere for my water to drain. My water drains to the front. He puts in a culvert at an elevation at the time that they felt was good. Next year, 2 doors down, Lucy comes in and builds her house. All of a sudden, not paying attention to what's going on upstream or downstream, they go in, put in their own culvert at an
isn't
elevation.
that part of the permitting process?
If you
to
want to
address
call it, yeah.
drainage?
Sure there was, but there really was no set plan, as all these homes were coming into rural sections, and they weren't designed with curb and gutter in mind. Builders, residents did the best they could to get water to flow. Now, obviously, back then, 30, 40 years ago, people weren't thinking about 1%, 2% pitches, side slopes, et cetera. So what do we have left today? We have ditches out there that have 0 slope. We have side slopes that basically are a V, impossible to maintain and nothing but hazards. And we have basically flat areas which water just sits there and basically, mosquito haven along with cattails or whatever else you want to consider it. So there's no one good explanation to how. It's a combination of things. By today's standards, what we've done in the past, we have the opportunity to police these areas. And residents are also, residents know what we have done, and they're policing it upon themselves.
And do we have a way to prevent them from, messing it up again?
Yes. By today, again, one of the most recent ones was on Leonard. A new house an existing house was raised and a new house was built. In that, we put a $5,000 bond for any damage to the right-of-way. In addition to, we made them cordon off the right-of-way, or the property line / right-of-way, so that there wouldn't be any additional damage. And if there's damage, we come back in there, take that $5,000 bond, and make necessary corrections.
And
We have
Dan, that's
two-
after you fix the ditch.
Correct, yes.
But if the ditch is bad and the house gets rebuilt and it doesn't work, there's really not much you can do
Yeah,
in
there
that
was-
case.
There's been a couple cases, one on High and Iris, where a new house was built. And we basically told him, go ahead and put the drainage where you want it, because right now, we can't tell you where to put it, because it couldn't make sense. And then 2 years later, we went down Iris and we corrected what he had put in.
What else are people's thoughts on this? I'm going to say this, and I've said it before. Every time we do a ditch project in the city of Darien, we've improved that street and those houses on this. When we're looking at a ditch project, we're improvements for the next 50 years. I always say we chase good money after good with this, so I'm going to be in favor of these three, I'll tell you right now. But everybody's got their own opinion on it.
Dan, we talked at one time about having 27 miles of ditches. And I think we've completed, what, about 11 miles of that?
I was just gonna run through that, as a matter of fact. The total miles of ditches is actually 26.83.
Yeah.
Percent completed to date is 57.81. Remaining miles are approximately 11. Average miles per year, 1.72. Projected completion date is 2023, based on the schedule that we're at right now.
So that means
So
every ditch then would be repaired.
Correct.
Every problem area, yeah.
And I think it needs to be pointed out that we really couldn't start and deal with ditches as aggressively as we have been until the basins were built.
And that's part of it too, and I think the program that we have in place, the amount that we've been doing every year has been, I'll call it, not rushed. The crews have been able to keep up with it. I know there's also been some talk of doing them all at one time, in which case, I wouldn't suggest that, but I think we're moving at a good pace.
What year did you start the ditches?
2006.
That was after the basins were done, were they not, Ken?
No, we started with Richmond Avenue, remember?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was where our crews basically started, before we outsourced it, we wanted to see the talent that our crews had,
Yeah.
and we weren't able to do it as well as outsourcing it.
Yeah, the basins came along,
Simultaneously, yeah.
yeah.
So is it roughly 100,000, wait, let me see.
I'm sorry?
Is it a million a mile? Is that what it's turning out to be?
I'd have to I haven't done that calculation,
Well,
but if we were to take all,
1.7 and 1.7, I'm thinking it's,
if I take all the years, some years we've only put 300, 400,000 into it, so I'd have to add up all the costs over the, since 2006.
And I agree that there's a need, like you said, it's not an issue of the need, it's whether or not we want to spend the money, because as Treasurer Coyne said, this is not really sustainable based on the projections, right? Especially if the state comes in and changes some sort of funding to the municipalities.
Right.
So yes, I agree there's a need, I don't think anybody questions it, but I also, at this stage, based on these projections, I don't think that your projections are really sustainable.
I mean, 11 more miles?
11 more miles in that time frame. It's not possible.
And without not knowing what happens to the state, and then it's like,
Well, I think even without any reduction from the state, based on our fiscal year 18 forecast, it's not sustainable. So at some point, your projections, I think, are going to have to be revised to account for our fiscal projections.
and that's very true. That's why we're waiting for our next program to come out. Would we like to do more? Yes. We've listed there's 3 additional ditches that we looked at too, which are alternates.
Well, it'd be
Again,
nice if we could do them all, right?
I agree.
But you can't.
Right.
So I'm just thinking maybe in the near future, we should look at a revised timetable to getting all these done, so this conversation doesn't come up every year.
Well, and if I look at the last several years, we've been averaging approximately, I want to say 4, 6, 8, about 900,000 last year. The year prior to was almost 800. The year prior to about 800 again. So if I'm doing a very rough average here. I'm at about the 800 to 850 mark without not adding up all my numbers.
But
although
you're
I'm
above
giving-
that today, right? You're
For
above that.
ditches only,
Yeah.
right?
The ditches
You're-
only, yes.
You're
not-
above that today.
I'm sorry?
And you're higher than that today.
Right, and really what it is we're really doing 4, I'll say 4 ditches this year, because I look at Chestnut and Alabama
That's 2.
as 2. Unfortunately, 69th Street is its own animal based on the length. And Tennessee, again, is, yes, it's in there. But and all these roads are scheduled to be paved next year, in addition to the 3 additional we had in there which were Peony, Western, Sunrise, and 72nd, 4. Out of those 4, 3 are scheduled to be paved next year. So what does that do? That already takes the program, the road program for next year, and puts another year out on it. So there's a domino effect going on here. These ditches now, if they don't get approved, I'll call them the alternates, those alternates will be placed on the list for next year. And again, it'll keep on be moved out. So right now, while my prediction is 2023 completed, 2023 is going to become 2024. The road program, we may cut it next year just by default by not putting those 3 roads in there. Or, I think I want to be careful as I say that, based on the rating system, we might put another 3 roads in there and postpone these out the following year.
Gale was an extra project last year, right?
Right.
And if Gale wasn't completed last
Gale
year,
and
it would
Capital,
be
I
on this
believe.
budget right now, yes?
Gale and Capital were extra projects, if I'm not mistaken.
Scale, well, I think we budgeted for capital. I have it right here. We did,
Okay.
we did budget, well, yeah, we
Not-
did.
Maybe not originally.
I want to say Gale came in later, though.
But Gale was
we
part of the
approved it later.
budget, though,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
But if we didn't budget for Gale and Capital, Tennessee would, would probably not be on this list right now, yes?
Correct.
I would say, Dan, that we're probably not looking at 2024, we're probably looking at much later than that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we may only be able to do a one-ditch project here.
Right, and at what point do we revise
And we gotta
the
revise the road.
anticipated
Then we
completion date?
Yeah, and then we'll,
That's right.
Is it 2016, is it 2020, is it 2025? But at some point, and it's gonna push the street catalog out as well. I mean,
Right.
at some point, these numbers are not sustainable. And I'm not saying we have to make that change today, but I'm just, treasure corn, I mean,
Well, again, and again, we have to be cognizant that we're not gonna go and do a roadway where a ditch was not completed, because then we're really wasting good money for bad.
Right.
So by pushing the ditches out, yes, we push the roads out. As we push the roads out, we push the life of a road out. The life expectancy of a road is approximately 12 years. With the crack filling we've been doing, yes, that's been prolonging it by approximately 3 years. Is that a savings? Sure, that is a savings. But we're looking at programs that we put in place along with schedules, and yes, everything could be adjusted and pushed out. We wanted to make sure we were giving everyone the best information possible and going on what's the standards out there for roadways, for example.
Dan, I have a couple questions. Jumping to the Tennessee Avenue, 72nd to Plainfield, I asked you that question, and I believe that ties to on your ditch rating program, that it's the Plainfield Highlands Tennessee Avenue
Correct.
line item. And in that case, the road says, at least the program I have, the road says that it's budgeted for, or ideally scheduled for 2020.
For Tennessee,
Mhm.
that's north of 67th, if I'm not mistaken, is the one we're looking at. This Tennessee is between Plainfield and 72nd.
Right, so what is it on the ditch rating? What's it called? I
Let
can't
me try
find
to
it.
Tennessee 67.
And that's the question I sent you in an email. and
I
you said
follow,
it
you're
was the
right,
same.
okay, and I responded to that late. That's Tennessee Avenue, which is 2022. Now, proposed road program. I'll have to double check
Yeah,
that.
I guess I don't see a
because-
2016 Tennessee on here.
And you're correct. I'm not sure if one of these is a typo. Let me see what the road program says. I have that right here.
the ditch, you have the road. Bring him up.
Double check.
He's looking at the road.
Oh, I see. Well, this should tie to the road too.
67th, north of Tennessee Avenue, north of 67th is scheduled for 2020.
Yeah, and Tennessee in the road is scheduled for 2017.
17. at least the backup.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
And then that is correct.
That's over by
So
where
maybe
Jim
we
Kaiser
can
lives.
move that one up a year,
Move what, I'm sorry, move what, up what year?
the Tennessee.
The ditch?
Mhm.
I would, my opinion is that I would rather not. The problem on Tennessee is, we originally had 70 seconds scheduled to be completed before Tennessee. If I complete 70 seconds before Tennessee, I have a problem with the way water flows. Right now, the problem is that Tennessee, the water is flowing the wrong way. Why is it flowing the wrong way? Again, basically to what I said before, people took it upon themselves to let water flow as supposed to. We have a resident that the water now congregates and goes through his side yard back to 71st Street. People that are familiar with 71st Street is currently inundated with water, and the water from Tennessee currently goes to 72nd through this property owner's side yard, two residences or two property owners, and gets back onto 71st Street. So Tennessee does need to get done. You know, so does 72nd. That's why I said, well, we won't do 72nd, we'll put it in as an option. Let's get Tennessee done. Because again, it's a similar situation where this resident is getting some water seepage. Is it from that during the heavier rains? The answer is yes. Does his garage, the garage will consider an ancillary structure. If it floods or not, we won't really take that into consideration because it is an ancillary building.
And can you tell me what the Sunrise cost was the last time you looked at it?
Got it yesterday, didn't I?
No, we talked about 6 of them.
You mean the ditch?
Yeah.
Last,
Yeah, I did.
We talked about a number of them
Right,
with
that
the
was it.
total cost, not just the one.
Sunrise,
Right, or all of 'em.
237, 850, Dan?
yes, 237, 850.
Wow.
And what would that cover?
From
Oh, I'm
Elm,
sorry, would
From-
that be,
From Elm to Janet?
yes. Ellen's a little more of a complicated project.
wait a
It's a shorter project, but it's complicated. There's several, yeah.
Yeah, there's a high point just west of it, and then everything slopes.
Then we have some side yards issues along with a 30-inch pipe that comes in off of Janet's from Route 83.
You said for the Tennessee Avenue project, 72nd to Plainfield, you said the water flows the wrong way. You're projecting to get the water flowing back to Plainfield Road? Is that
Correct,
what-
correct. And when the county came in years ago, the inverts or the pipes were set at an elevation that can only accept so much water.
Is Plainfield Road higher? at that
Plainfield
point?
Road is
What
higher,
else-
but the storm
Tennessee-
sewer is lower, so basically it's what's referred to as a reverse pitch.
Okay, I'm thinking, I'm seeing Tennessee,
Right.
coming into Plainfield.
It goes
and
up,
it's-
right, and when we,
How are you going to get the water to flow towards Plainfield Road if
The
the
pipe.
Plainfield is higher?
pipe is, most of it'll be piped, and what'll happen is, the road is up here, and it goes up towards Plainfield Road is Tennessee. The pipe will be at an elevation that'll be probably 5 to 6 foot lower from the top of Tennessee, and it'll flow towards the south via pipe.
Okay.
There's no way we can put an open ditch there just based on the elevations like you stated.
now, one of the other things I wanted to bring up with this whole ditch rating, because I realize we have been spending consistently for the last few years, but I do want to say that on a strong positive note, we have really taken care of some of these really high numbers. We're dipping towards the 50 range, whereas we started almost at 70. So in my opinion, as you get down to the 50s, these things aren't as critical as the 70s were. So I would think that we should see a little bit more of a spreading out, because even though they become now the highest rating, I don't think they're as urgent as these other ones started out to be.
And I
But-
think,
But if they're timed with the road.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's,
Well, that's
that's
the
what
thing. Then you
throws,
gotta look at the road and say, are those really urgent too? Or, because you're all rating, the ratings now, are they still
Well,
as high as
the roads have
they
a
were?
life expectancy, right? Whereas the ditches, I mean, if they're bad, they're bad. I mean, they make
Correct.
it worse, but,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, they're not deteriorating like a road would, I would assume, right?
right, the ditches are already deteriorated, so the ones that haven't been done, there's no saving them.
So the point of having the two catalogs is that you do the road, and then you have to redo the road later if you do the ditch, right?
Correct. That's why we won't do a road unless the ditch is done first.
Dan, who does the storm sewer, who's responsible for the storm sewers? You know, in areas where you don't have ditches, whose responsibility? 100%?
Yes.
The county is not responsible for anything?
on Plainfield Road, I mean, a
Well,
county
yeah.
road.
I mean, on a county road, I'm talking about residential, you know, if in this area, instead of ditches, they had storm sewers, what would?
Correct. Be the same, yeah. And once all the infrastructure is fixed, it'll all be maintenance items, no different than your subdivision, which has, you know, curb and gutter and storm sewer. Again, I refer to a ditch as a curb and gutter / storm sewer system. But there was more standards in place when curbs and gutters and storm sewers were being installed or, you know, part of a plan. Now, yes, there's, in Alderman Kenny's ward, for example, there's, you know, smaller projects that we've done, but yet there's some pipes that are in there that have been undersized for rain events.
How do other municipalities handle these kinds of projects from, you know, a municipal services perspective?
They contract a lot more. We do a lot of value engineering in-house. I think, you know, they do some. If I was to do a comparison, I would say mile for mile cost, we're definitely probably 25% less than what they would be spending.
But I mean, do they do this work?
Some
they-
do, yes. And again, I don't have a list. I've never
Well,
completed
Dan, in
that.
Willowbrook, you were there for a long
Well,
time.
Willowbrook, yeah. We were done in Willowbrook by the time I left.
But it was the same thing. It was
Right.
responsibility. It's our property. We own it.
Right.
So it is our responsibility to make sure that drains properly. The residents' responsibility is on their private property. So if Dan builds a ditch or fixes a ditch and a resident says, well, there's a low spot on my property, Dan says, well, you have to now get it to our ditch.
Right.
So that's kind of the cutoff. It's literally who owns the property.
Okay.
Right, and we make the provisions to look at elevations beyond the roadway, to see what a resident has in their backyard, because we know that the water has to come to the front in many cases.
In some cases, some municipalities haven't dealt with it. You may
Right.
remember a couple of years
Yeah.
ago.
Oh,
Downers
yeah.
Grove had to take out a $5 million bond to do the Queens Court area over there because it was so bad, because they had let that go for years.
Plus, some municipalities are looking at doing a separate line item for utility tax.
Right.
I think one of the big, 'cause I've worked in a couple communities that were rural ditches, and as an example, I think we've mentioned it again a number of times, but there's some detention facilities that have been fixed or actually built newer detention facilities, and that really allows you to do that. If you could fix your ditch and it has nowhere to go, you can't do that.
Right.
And that was done with working with DuPage County. There was grant money, they constructed the basin, so that was done cooperatively with the county. But at this point, yeah, that
Yeah.
then gets turned to us.
Right, right.
I think Tina brings up a good point that as we go farther into it, and even Jorg mentioned it too, that you're gonna probably have time, they're probably gonna be pushing back. And yeah, you're right, Sylvia, because, you know, it is, you're gonna do the streets before you end up doing the ditches. But again, it's one of these situations with these three ditches, it's gonna be, eventually it's gonna have to be spent, and the question is, what is everybody's opinion on this? Should we do this and do this now? And it goes back to the situation that the necessity is there for these three. So what is everybody else's opinion on this?
And when you say the three, you're referring to the
talking
237?
Yeah, I'm
one?
talking Chestnut in Alabama, 69th Street in Tennessee. I know we shouldn't group them together, but it's gonna come down to the same conversation we're gonna have with all three.
Mhm.
Well, from our perspective in presenting the projects, we look at that 3-year window. And if there's sufficient funding for that 3-year window, again, we're recommending those amount of projects through that 3 years. If we looked out 10 years, obviously that gets worse because our operating expenses in the general fund, primarily salaries, the normal expenses are rising every year. So I agree that we have to look out. And I think in some cases, we have done that a bit here by really limiting it to the 3 projects. And I think maybe a couple of the roads had to get adjusted based on doing the ditches we did. But I think as you start getting out after 3 years, it's really hard to say, we're not going to have enough money or we are going to have enough money. But at least for this 3-year, this picture, it looks good for capital projects. So as we get into next year's budget and we're sitting here and we do look at that next 3rd year out, we're not going to have property to sell. We're not going to have these things. So it may look at that point in that 3rd year that we would have to readjust some of our schedules. But again, it's almost getting doom and gloom, and I kind of want to be a little more upbeat because we did present a plan that we're able to do a lot of projects over a 3-year period with living within our means. So that, whatever that's worth, just to keep in mind.
And if I just may interject for a minute, Brian brought up a good point. Oldfield Road was postponed from last year's paving program and brought into this year's paving program just because the ditch was done late last year. And it got pushed the year before, so there's a domino effect, just a little more information.
You mentioned sometimes that the road doesn't deteriorate as badly as the ditch. In the case of Gale Avenue, the ditch had a negative impact on the road.
It ate it away.
It ate it away. And so we will have situations, we may need to look at the way we rate ditches in terms of how they deteriorate the street, the road, and maybe look at those projects first. So maybe we need to change how we prioritize what we do. If we're going to continue to look at roads and ditches at the
I think
same
that's a good
time,
point.
we need to look at that.
Well, we've done that already through the catalog. The catalog already tells you what's the order. We just happen to hit a year where, with the exception of Tennessee, well, even Tennessee is in there now, all of these roads are scheduled for next year.
But Tennessee ties in with 72nd Street.
Correct.
So,
Correct. So
But
there's,
Dan, we worked real hard not to let roads dictate ditches. Even though to a certain extent, they do. We did change it to where it's not necessarily always just the road dictating the ditch. We did work on that. When we did the ditch booklet, we did it
Right.
after the road booklet. And we didn't want roads to drive ditches.
correct.
But Joe, the reality is in the budget, it works a
does.
little different than the committee did. I think when the committee came up with additional projects, that was in the event that additional funding was available.
Right.
If you take just how we're budgeting and presenting the budget, the roads are dictating the ditches, so we don't end up putting the roads off more.
Well, we may get to the point where we put them both off. If that roads are going to dictate ditches, we can't do certain ditches, then we have to move everything back with
You
the
might
roads.
you might adjust the road schedule. It
Yeah,
depends.
we gotta-
Correct.
I don't see any way around that. I think
No,
we're
but
going to
there's also, and I think Dan has talked about it in the past, I think it was Westmont, maybe, they postponed the street so long, it ended up costing them just.
It was Hinsdale.
Was it Hinsdale?
Hinsdale,
Absurd
it was
amount
a-
of money.
Right.
wasn't it
I agree.
70 million or something like that?
Yeah, some ludicrous amount, because they did wait too long.
Right.
But, and I'm not against these projects, I'm just saying,
You have to be careful.
at some point, we gotta,
Well, I mean, we've been real good in terms of infrastructure improvement in the city of Darien. I don't know, at other communities, I don't know what their city councils talk about or their village boards, but we've been extremely diligent in dealing with infrastructure improvements in the city of Darien. Residents should be very,
right, no, I agree.
these are needed. I would agree we do these because the 3-year projection shows that we can do these this year and we're okay. I think what we need to do is take a look at where we're going to go in the future, and maybe Municipal Services Committee needs to be charged with that responsibility.
Hey, Dan, I got a question with the Sawmill Creek, jumping ahead just because this does affect what we're talking about now. Okay, so the Sawmill Creek is a multiple-phased project. Now, this is going to be very costly. The first phase is $250,000. Now, after, let's say that we're lucky enough to keep the phases going as needed, would that impact some of this, I'm not saying the ditch rating because the ditches haven't changed, but the water flow would change with all these other areas. So is it possible, does it make sense to kind of wait and see how that works and then revisit some of these scoring?
I understand what you're saying. I mean, Sawmill Creek is a project where over the course of the years, there's a lot of sedimentation that has entered that creek. Residents have taken it upon themselves to encroach into the creek area as well.
With what, like fences and
Structures,
sheds and
structures
things?
such as fences, there's some sheds on there, gardens. The topography has changed. If we do nothing, we will continue to have the flooding that occurs. If we put a program in place, it will reduce the frequency of flooding. Let's say from right now it floods, and I'm going to assume at a 15-year rain event.
Dan, I think it's important though to define flooding, because for the purposes of how we look at things, flooding a house is different maybe than what you're talking. You might better explain that so everybody is on
Right.
the same understanding.
First of all, when I say flooding, it does not refer to water entering a home or a basement. Water will hit sheds and or garages. Those are referred to as ancillary structures. They'll come close in some cases to homes. But the flooding that occurs on our 100-year rain events or 75-year rain events does not impact any other homes that we know of. So what this Sawmill Creek project does, it basically eliminates a lot of the flooding that occurs in the roadways such as Sunrise and Janet, such as 69, portions of 69th Street, portions of 68th Street. I'm sure there's some I'm missing right now, but it does lower that flood elevation for this project. Unfortunately, the Sawmill Creek project is going to be probably close to a 10-year project. Engineering costs came in at $4 million. We looked at the value engineering and plugged in some of the numbers that we could use, and we're basically half that cost. Regardless, we're still at approximately 2.5 million. So it will take us 10 years just to put Sawmill Creek back into original condition. The existing pipes, if you recall, we talked about in the budget last year, we approved for the jetting and televising of the existing pipes under Sawmill Creek. Those pipes are shot. Those are all culvert metal pipes. Those pipes range in size, average about 15 inches. What those pipes do is they carry what's referred to as low-flow water. It's an underdrain. If and when those pipes fail, water will then begin to sit in those ditches. I'll call it in the creek bed. Does that need to be fixed? The answer could be no, but it will cause an effect by having standing water in a creek that is typically dry. So there's pipe infrastructure needs to get replaced, so that triggers right there an excavation. Once that excavation is triggered, you now should come back and reprofile everything to its original state in order to move ahead.
And Dan, some of this is side yards, it's rear yards, it's
It's a
crossing
combination,
streets.
right?
It's a combination of a lot of things, correct?
Right.
So my concern with the program when I first looked at it is the Sunrise that has been, coming up every year and getting pushed off. Now, with the Sawmill Creek, which is an area that will affect Sunrise, as you just mentioned, ideally, if there's any relief, since it doesn't sound like we'll be able to put that in the budget for fiscal year 16, since, we already have so much in it, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of support to add another one. I'm hoping that some of these residents that are on the list that are getting pushed off will see a little bit of a relief from this Sawmill Creek project.
Well, yes, but the problem is we're going to start at
The
upstream.
the north end.
Right, all the way at the south
Right.
end.
The south end?
The south end, upstream.
Oh, well, then that's good for,
Are you going to?
that's good for Sunrise.
Yes and no, because Sunrise is dual problems. They have a creek in the back, and they basically have a waterway, I'll call it a waterway in the front. So the ditches will have a benefit if they're completed, aside from the fact of when Sawmill Creek, that portion behind them is done.
Dan,
So-
did I hear you say you were doing work on private property for Sawmill Creek?
No.
Okay, I
This
thought you
is all
said side
within-
yards, and I thought I heard.
There's side yards, in this case, there's side yard easements like there is in your subdivision. There'll be certain, certain properties, between two properties, that'll have what's referred to as a utility easement or a stormwater easement. This is the same thing, except it's an open area that has been inundated with trees, overgrowth, et cetera, et cetera.
I would recommend that we take a poll on these 3 ditches. Couple things I'd like to see going forward. Sawmill Creek, I'd like to see an in-depth plan from municipal services over the next 10 years.
And yes, and I'm sorry, we just received the water modeling study within the last 2 weeks, so.
No problem,
We
no
have
problem.
not gotten a chance really to present a full, we wanted to at least put it, include it in the budget. We know it's gonna be a multi-year project, and a lot of the information is not really, the full detailed report hasn't been presented to municipal services and/or city council.
But over the 3-year budget, just as info, we have plugged in 250,000 each year.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I was
For
gonna
now.
just ask that.
And then on going forward, I'm assuming that we're also gonna be taking a look at ditch projects and instead of saying, hey, we have to get the ditch project done for this street, that we're gonna be looking at each individual street and ditch projects. Is that what we also talked about too?
Yeah, I mean.
Because I know what we're coming down to is everybody's, I'm sorry, Sylvia, but everybody's
No,
coming
that's
down to
fine.
is saying, look, I don't know if I want to spend this, or spend this, spend this. But at the same time, we have basically, after this is completed, we're going to be in the, 60% range of getting most of these, completed. And more importantly, we've gotten almost the top priority ones done. So again, what is everybody's feelings? Is that satisfactory? Is that an idea? What's our poll, on this? Because we could be here all night debating this, and I'm not trying to rush this thing through, but at the same time, I'd
Poll
like
on
to
these
see.
3 projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a need. I don't think we really have a choice at this point, but I do think there's a serious need to revisit. Not taking anything away from the catalogs, I think you've got to take a different approach maybe, or a different look at these catalogs, because I don't think it's sustainable. I think it's a good point that, the importance of these projects, at least the ditches, right? We've already gotten the worst ones out of the way, so maybe it is time to reprioritize or use a tier system.
Well, maybe what we'll do is maybe instead of doing 3 or 4 a year, maybe we do 1.
Or we just cap the,
The expense.
cap the amount and
'Cause-
say,
'cause
what are
I-
you gonna do with this
What are you gonna do
amount
with
of money?
500,000?
Well, the
But I
roads,
thought we
Dan,
talked about doing this last year. I thought we had the same discussion.
We did.
Good.
We always do.
This comes up every year.
Yeah, we always do.
Well, but I mean, I think we talked about doing that, coming up with a kind of a budget for ditches and then figuring out what's gonna fit in it. But now, the capital here is almost doubling your, it's almost as much as your maintenance budget.
well, the solution is, if we do 5 miles of roads now, we go down to 4 or 3.5.
There's a
That's where the
solution, right.
That's where the starting point would be.
And the math is simple. If we
Yeah.
take the miles of roadway, divided by 12, that gives us a projection of basically where we're at today, 5.0 miles.
You go divided by 15 with your crack seal
You could.
program, I thought that buys you another 3 years.
It does. In some cases it does, in some cases it doesn't. Because of Clarendon Hills Road, for example. Clarendon Hills Road may only be a 9-year life road just based on the use. With the crack seal, it's increased to the 12. My street, for example, that's one I've been kind of watching to see what the cause and effect is. That was paved in 2006. 18 is the next time it's rescheduled for. It'll easily make that, if not beyond. So again, I'm very cognizant to what's going on.
Dan, there's no doubt that the 5 miles now need repairs. I mean,
Right.
if we're talking about at some point looking at the different miles and streets, I mean, you just use Linden or your street as an example, but the streets you have now that are driving this need to be done. There's no question about that.
79
Especially the last winter we had really took a beating on the streets. It was so cold. So this year, when Dan looked at the roads, very clear, it wasn't a doubt in your mind that
Right.
to stick with those 5 miles this year.
Well, you know what? I think this winter's been colder than last winter, so
No.
what's it,
No.
really?
February has.
No.
February, but
This
overall,
February.
Yeah, February's been a bear.
Yeah, overall, last
January
year's
was warmer.
temperatures
Okay.
had a toll on the roadways, and I mean, I've seen roads last year that basically picked up 2.5 inches above the curb and gutter. That's how much frost had lifted them up. Although, all that has to come back down, so.
So what's our feeling on it for the 3 ditches?
Doing the hands up?
Please,
For this year, yeah.
5 to 2?
How many ditches did you say?
3.
Well, I think we got more than 3 in there, though. You've bundled
3 is the
them.
base.
Well, you've bundled some.
The ones
No.
presented,
Well,
The
the ones
3 programs
presented.
you're
With
presenting.
figures next to
Chestnut
them
Hill,
for the
you
3.
know, Chestnut
Yeah,
Hill,
yeah.
that's the 2.
But at the same time, we're gonna revisit with municipal services a newer plan for the ditch project too, correct?
well,
Well,
that
we-
means adding roads, Ted. If you're saying
I'm not-
ditches,
I don't think we
it's-
necessarily need a new
I
plan,
don't-
I think maybe it needs a tweak plan.
I don't think we need to revisit the ditch booklet or the road. I think what we need to do is look at the next ditch project in terms of priority as driven by the road project and say we only do, maybe Sylvia's got the answer to it. Maybe we say, what can we do for
Either
$500,000 a
X,
year?
right.
What can we do?
You can't really apply that as a blanket either. I mean, last year was a
I-
great year at work, and I took my family to Europe. This year, it's not so great, we're going on a cruise. I mean, it's kinda, you
That
adjust
sounds pretty
based-
great.
Yeah, no, doesn't it? I mean, you kind of adjust on what's going on.
Yeah,
right?
but we may have one road, we may have the worst road in, excuse me, we may have the worst ditch rating project where it's gonna cost us $400,000 by itself. I mean, look at this right here, we got a $550,000
Well, that's the
project.
thing, each of these carry different weights.
that was
Right.
Oldfield Road last year. That's the same.
Yeah,
exact-
Oakfield Road was $400,000 by itself, I think.
So I think we should look at
And we
that as
tweaked it
well,
at that
the
point.
money per project. Because even if one is rated a little higher than the other, but it's the 500,000 versus 100,000, maybe we squeeze in the 100,000.
Well, I think that's what we looked at this year in comparison to what we've done for the last several years, is to take this average and to combine these 3. Like I said, originally, Brian and I had this discussion, I was introducing, to do 6 of them. Why? Because they were driven by the road program. Again, with that said, yeah, reality, doing ditches for 1.9 million, well, there goes the road program.
Well, could we, I know that there's other stuff on this capital projects list. I mean, maybe if something else goes, I'll feel better about the ditches. I mean, we've got other big nuts coming up further down. Can we kind of table this and go forward and see where we end up?
I would suggest tabling Sawmill Creek at this point until we have, the more,
Well, Sawmill Creek, Dan, you're right, though. I mean, putting money in there doesn't spend it because it has to come back to the council. It's a full report. I mean, if the council, if we don't think we'll address it till the next year, but I think your intentions were to bring something back to the council.
right, it would
So
all-
you have more information. This kind of, the magnitude of this really just got to us a couple weeks ago.
I would agree with tabling the 250,000 because I know this is a project that's absolutely critical, but before we start committing money to it, we need to take a look at this in depth, and this is one of the reasons why I'd like to see what's going on with this. And the question is, if we're gonna do this over a 10-year project, and we need to take care of it, is there anything pressing on Sawmill Creek right now that has to be done this year? I know the whole project has gotta be done, but I'm asking this question, could we wait 1 year?
And the answer is yes. If there's an emergency repair, it is what it is. If a pipe does collapse, maybe it'll collapse midstream. In that case, we go in there, we do a spa repair. Spa repair will be approximately $5,000 to $10,000, depending on the depth of the excavation.
So that's a yes.
Okay.
If there's interest in holding out on that one, that,
Because I truly believe this Sawmill Creek, I saw it on the budget. I'd like to see in-depth what's gonna go on with this whole project. So we are prepared for it and that we make a commitment going forward for 10 years saying this is what needs to be done.
Right, because I would think, Dan, you can't start it and then stop it. I mean, that wouldn't.
Sure
make
you
a lot-
could.
You could?
Yeah, we would do it in increments of, I'll call it 500 feet per, or what makes the most economical sense to start and stop. I wouldn't stop if I'm 2 houses away from a adjacent roadway. So I think, we'd have to map it out
Okay.
and do it, control it that way.
I agree with Alderman Shower on that one. I mean, you know, you pressed us because of these, for the ditch projects because of the road program, so I say that, until all the information's in, I'd say I don't wanna commit to it.
Sawmill Creek.
Sawmill Creek, correct.
In any of the 3 years?
No, I would
No.
say that this is.
Just the first year? Okay.
Just this first
Right.
year, because I'd like to see an in-depth,
Right.
situation that's going on.
Dan said he's working on it, right? Or you just got the
I
information,
mean, yeah, we
so-
just, the rest of the report came in, and we didn't think it was gonna be as bad as it was, but once the water modeling study was completed, which was just recently completed, hey, this is what it's gonna take.
The point is that if we're gonna if we're gonna commit 2.5 million to this project, and it sounds like it's needed, we better have all our ducks in a row for the next 10 years.
And I'm hoping over the course of 10 years, you increase economic development, raising money instead of us sitting back here saying we got to cut. Instead of the answer, the question could possibly be how do
need
we
to grow,
how do we
grow.
how do we generate revenue so we can do these projects? I haven't heard that at all here tonight. And I don't have the answer, but I think that's probably a philosophy that we have to take a look at.
Agree with you.
Yeah, of course.
So
So
are we in
table that?
agreement
We're gonna
that,
table that?
yeah, we're gonna table the sawmill and
Does that mean take it out?
Take
By
it out.
tabling, take it out?
take it
Okay.
out, and then stay with the 3 ditch projects? Is that what we're in agreement with?
Well, I'm sorry. I thought we meant, because like you said, we still got all these other projects to go through. If there's something with money found or, either way, we need the report.
Right.
In more detail. So I'm not, when you say table, I just,
When I mean
Well,
table
he's
it for
taking
this
it out.
year, it is sawmill we're not gonna do for
Okay,
this
We're
year.
it's gonna be a
I'd say-
0.
It's
yeah,
gonna be
take it
0
out.
for
Just take it
FYE
out.
16.
Just take that 1,496,800 and minus 250 from it.
Yeah, he's not saying table the discussion, he's saying take it out of there.
Take it out.
taking it out.
Okay. Are we all in agreement then?
Yes.
Okay. So let's go down to storm sewer, 210 Janet Avenue for 19,000.
Wait, where you at?
Still in capital, storm sewer, Ironwood, storm sewer cleaning and jetting, and then the bridge for carriage greens for 26.
Yeah, the
So-
first,
They're minor.
210 Janet Avenue is basically a flow issue. The flow issue is that the water sits adjacent to a residence at 210, and the water comes from the east to the west. The water should cross at 210 back to the south, in which case does not have the opportunity because there's no structure there. We cannot get the water from that 210 either back to the east or to the west, in which case this is one of those projects that staff has the capabilities and the resources to put simply a pipe underneath the roadway to be able to alleviate the water that accumulates in this resident's yard, couple properties.
It'll fix
In
the problem.
conjunction- Right, in conjunction with that, the resident, if he wants to, would be joining us with the rear yard drainage program, which he would be putting funds in to get the water from his backyard out to the front. Currently, if he was to do that, the water would have nowhere to go. So one project is ours, in which case then creates another project, which is referred to the rear yard drainage project.
Is the resident gonna take exception to us doing the one project that causes him to spend money on another project?
No, already had conversations with him, he's in agreement.
Which Janet Avenue is this?
It would be.
Is it near
west-
Sunrise, I want
Yeah,
to say?
Yeah, I'm
It's a
not
little
trying
to
to.
one-
the
is
east.
this the
Mid-block.
A little to the east, yeah.
This is the one off Plainfield Road closer to Cass Avenue?
Yes.
It's on that, it's not, it's not in,
toward,
it's not.
toward
in-
Clare Hills Road, between Clare Hills Road and.
Oh, no, I'm talking the one, the Janet Avenue closer to where you live.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not there, no.
Okay.
Anybody have an issue with it?
I have no problem with any of
Well,
them.
okay, so just so I'm clear, with this okay, back to the Sawmill Creek. When you do these studies, you're gonna find a lot of situations like this, like Janet, that has problems in their rear yard. No,
No.
okay.
Whatever we do, the water is already flowing to the creek. It's just the capacity over the course of years has been reduced. So a lot of Sawmill Creek is basically a lot of excavation and some removal of underbrush, mature trees, and structures.
Okay.
Dan, not to you know, not to say that this isn't an important project, but do we ever look at projects and see how many, you know, sort of a dollar per resident that they're impacting? I mean, this 19,000, is it just to help one resident?
No, it helps several, it's 1, 2, 2 to 3. And again, it's no different than since there's no structure there, let's take put the shoe on the other foot, if you want to say, if this was a storm sewer that is currently in a subdivision and water can't get from that part of the sidewalk to the storm sewer. So it's the same cause and effect. It's,
Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure, because one address is shown, so.
yes, I
Okay.
mean, we have done a cost benefit before. And it's very difficult to do a cost benefit just due to the size of the lots. If you go per size, it gets.
Yeah, I don't mean to drill it down that hard. I guess I'm just, you know, I think that's a good comparison, that if this was in another part of town and it was this type of situation, you would be fixing that too.
That is correct,
Could-
yes.
Could I make a suggestion? We have some items here which are going to require extensive discussion, the Bailey Road, et cetera, Might we want to end now? Because if we don't end now, we could be going till 11 o'clock tonight. Because I know how long it took us to discuss those items last night at Municipal Services, and the rest of the council hasn't even heard that discussion, nor, I mean, and I would imagine they want to have a say on what that project is. Might I recommend that we look at this as an ending point now and come back and finish this off next Tuesday? I don't know how the council feels. I mean, I'm tired. I mean, and I don't know if I
Yeah,
want
I'm
to sit here
afraid
for.
that these next items are gonna be a lot of schedules, a lot of math, and I'm just afraid
Which
that we're gonna
ones
go too late.
specifically are we talking
Well, I
about?
mean,
Other
we talked,
projects?
yeah, we talked about Bailey Road for about an hour last night. So, I mean,
About what, the light?
well, no, we talked about, we wanted to make sure that, that's the reason Dan did this chart, is because we wanted the council to have, we actually recommended he do this.
Yep.
So that the council would know exactly what our cost would be versus what the reimbursement's gonna be, what the county's gonna pay, what, you know,
But I'm sorry, Joe, are you talking about the light?
we're talking about
The total dollar amount.
total
The
dollar
storm
amount.
sewer and everything?
Yeah. You know, we talked about the.
Okay,
the
I
sh-
just didn't
The
know which
agreement, the
part you meant.
intergovernmental agreement with Woodridge to redo Plainfield Road and what that entails.
There's a large water main project the council didn't discuss or see yet because it's in the water fund, and
Right.
that's what you're talking about.
There's a lot going on here, and we went long last
I
night
think if
talking
you put that
about.
in a motion, Joe, you might get a quick second.
I would like to move that we end now.
Or end, yeah, I mean, we're almost there. We're almost to a stopping point at Bridge.
All right, so before we do this, are we going to come back and revisit Janet Avenue? Is that what we're saying?
Are we okay with
Should we
Janet?
finish 4376?
Yeah, that's a good point. Why don't we finish 4376?
Okay.
Yeah, which
And
gives
then-
us to
And
Bridge.
then,
That's fine.
Okay. So Janet Avenue, does anybody have an issue with the 19,000? Okay. Ironwood Storm Sewer Cleaning and Jetting for 15,800.
Yes, basically maintenance, so what's been identified, the existing infrastructure / storm sewers has sediment, quite a bit of sediment in it that needs to be cleaned and removed, and obviously televised to see if there's any infiltration from cracked pipes, et cetera, et cetera.
We've done this before. Any issues with it? Okay, we keep it in. Finally, Carriage Greens Evergreen Road Storm Sewer, the bridge,
Necessary.
for 26,000.
Oh, okay,
Bridge
I'm
is
sorry, yeah, I'm looking at, this is
I don't
another
have
one.
bridge.
This is for,
Carriage Greens Evergreen Road Storm Sewer.
I
I
don't know
thought somebody said the bridge, that's why I
Yeah,
was.
I'm like,
Oh,
where's
it's
the
under
bridge?
the bridge section.
Oh, okay.
That was
gotcha.
me who said it.
Yeah.
so.
Got it, okay. This was basically where a 12-inch concrete
Oh.
storm sewer accepts water from Evergreen Lane, travels along the rear easement on the north side between the homes, and eventually out falls into a branch of what's referred to as Sawmill Creek. The sewer line has residents complaining of surcharging and possible intrusion again of debris and roots. Again, this is a similar project to the one above, which basically consists of cleaning, root cutting, and televising the storm sewer for additional possible repairs due to infiltration.
Any issues with this one? Okay, we're all three of these, okay. So this will be a good ending point. Our next meeting will be March 3rd, 2015 at 6:30 PM in the council chambers. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'm sorry,
moved.
did
Oh, I'm
everybody
sorry.
get the water fund budget? It was up in your mailboxes, just so you,
Yeah, I'm gonna run up.
okay.
Motion to adjourn. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good idea.
Yeah. I didn't realize.